Welcome back to Wine and the Word. I'm Pastor Peter Johnson, and these monthly conversations and teaching sessions that we have been offering have been really exciting for us to do. So thanks for participating and getting together again. I'm also really pleased to be joined here by Pastor Gail as we want to dive into a topic of conversation that's a part of our culture and society right now. It's the role of women in society, the Me Too movement, and all of those important things that we are working through as a society. And so we wanted to wade into some of these consequential topics. Not that we don't, but this is one of those very current trending topics for us. So Pastor Gail, you got all things rolling in December when you did a Wine on the Word on women in the Bible.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little overview of that, simple, before we dive into our stuff.
Yeah. There aren't a lot of women that are really lifted up in the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, about as leaders, and yet they have their presence is known. We had Ruth, we had Esther, we had Mary, we had many of them. Mm-hmm. And what has happened, I think, over the years, or as we have studied more and more about them, we found their incredible impact on faith, on being bold in what was a very difficult time. Mm-hmm. For them to be bold. And I think now today we come back to that and we say, so how are we still bold in our faith? How are we sharing that faith, teaching that faith as women and mm-hmm. as people of faith, as families of faith mm-hmm. In our world today?
Yeah, right on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so things are evolving, of course, and they have for centuries, and we find ourselves here in the early part of 2019 too at a time when I think about my own time and place. Michelle is my wife, and we have 3 boys that are in high school, junior high, and middle school. Back when we were married in 1994, Michelle talked about her first job as a marketing person at a concrete retaining wall company. Mm-hmm. And that was the time when she kind of experienced a little bit about what we talk historically about her role as a woman in a predominantly male
right.
industry.
Right.
So that's a reality. One of the things that we've been really grateful for is she's been career oriented in the places where we've lived, is that as she is engaged in newer opportunities, she has kind of landed into a society in a culture that is having more doors opening, and less of issues, for Michelle as a woman than it was before.
I think some opened more quickly than others.
Mm-hmm.
I think there were some, and still are, some professions that are dominated by one or the other. Mm-hmm. But we do see male nurses. We see mm-hmm. Women preachers.
Exactly.
We're starting to see more of this crossing those lines, and in a good way, mm-hmm. in a very positive way.
Absolutely. And of course, as we think about your son and daughter and my 3 boys, the world in which they are now seeing and witnessing is now that world. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I get a little challenged by sometimes is that in my style and in my relational, when I get to know people, there are times when I like to hug and I mm-hmm. like to be real personable in those ways, and one of the realities that this whole time has helped me be just responsible and a little bit careful is that that's not always the best thing for me to do, at least in an outward way, but it's
I think it's the awareness. We have stopped to at least think about how we present ourselves mm-hmm. in all kinds of ways. Because whether it's male or female, in some ways, not everyone wants to be hugged, and right. It's those spaces that mm-hmm. we honor, that we respect, and learning how to do that differently. I think mm-hmm. here at St. Andrew, we are all working really hard toward finding that place. Mm-hmm. I think on our staff, we do a great job. We've got men and women working together very respectfully.
Yeah,
And,
I think so too.
And by inviting these opportunities now to teach and learn with our congregation, that I think also wants to have those conversations. I think it's the conversations that are going to move us forward.
Exactly.
Open and honest conversations about equity and justice.
That's
not
right.
just about men and women, but also about people of color, about people of different faiths. All of these conversations are just going to do nothing but do good for us.
Exactly. Well, we just passed through Martin Luther King weekend as well, being the Tuesday after that commemoration, and so we were once again reminded about how we're really on this journey, especially with women in the church and church leadership. I mean, when it was in the 70s that the ELCA,
in the 1970s, we had Elvina Platts, a name that I don't know offhand or didn't know well, but Elvina Platts and Barbara Andrew, one from the ALC, one from the LCA, which is now the two churches that make up what is today the ELCA. They were our pioneers in women leaders in the church in more modern times.
Almost 50 years ago.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I remember in my first call in Webster, New York, I went to the Synod Assembly. This was 1998. And I sat next to a woman who I introduced myself to, and she said, I was the fourth woman ordained in the ELCA, which was great. And, for me as a young pastor, but, women were pastors throughout my whole upbringing, right? But they weren't very common, though. We ordained women.
That's right.
But they weren't very common, but it's just becoming more and more. And it reminds me some about how it takes time for people, for congregations, for the church to prayerfully and together as community consider these things.
Time does change things. I think time is what helps us navigate, helps us walk through some of these times. And usually the changes that come through time are for the better. It isn't maybe always what we're thinking it should be. The end result isn't always where we think we ought to go, but it does cause us to always be thinking and wanting to move forward in a healthy and good way. And we have a lot of things on the table yet today. It's not over. The conversations aren't all done, but the fact that we have conversations and are willing to listen and are willing to step out and put ourselves out there and ask those questions. That's the gift.
And I think being in community too, where, Pastor Gail, you and I are on staff here together, our other staff members and people at Sander, I think we really do want to have healthy, constructive conversations about these things, recognizing that while we're talking about seismic shifts in culture and tradition, sometimes those happen over 150 years. But how important it is to be civil, to be friendly, to be faithful. God is always going to be okay with us. I mean, we're always blessed, and it's just the process of getting there that's just as rewarding as the goals that we have in mind to achieve if we know them.
Right, and that's where these conversations like Wine and the Word and these opportunities to plant some seeds, to have those opening conversations and to be able to explore how we can continue to live out our faith in all kinds of ways and hopefully treat each other in the ways that God intended for us.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, then we'll turn you to your small group now for your conversations. I don't think there's any lack of material for you to discuss. The questions will be on the screen here too for your conversations, and we wish you the best in the process. Thanks, Pastor Gail.
Thank you, Pastor Peter.
Great.